The rich, savory aroma of slow, cooked pot roast drifted through the Pierce family's dining room in Columbus, Ohio, mingling with the yeasty scent of freshly baked rolls and the unspoken strain that always lingered over Sunday dinners. I adjusted the silverware at each place setting, lining every fork and knife with mechanical precision, while my younger sister Madison's cheerful voice floated in from the living room. I hit 20,000 followers today. Her announcement came with the triumph of a medal, winner, phone held aloft like a trophy. Sponsorship deals are already pouring in, she added with a grin that seemed to light up the entire house. From the corner of my eye, I caught Dad's approving nod. Mom's eyes sparkled with pride as she reached over to smooth a strand of her perfectly coiffed hair. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Mom said warmly. "All your hard work is paying off." I set the final knife in place and quietly slipped into my seat, unseen and unacknowledged, as usual. 27 years old, and still performing the same role I'd played since I was 12. The dutiful daughter setting the table, the invisible one living in her childhood room, while Madison, at 25, basked under the family spotlight as the rising social media star. Mom and Dad exchanged a knowing glance across the table, the kind couples share when they've already rehearsed what's coming. Mom's tone softened, the syrupy sweetness she used whenever she wanted to cushion a blow. "Alexandra, honey," she began, sliding the bowl of mashed potatoes toward me. "We need to talk about your room." My fork froze midair. "Madison needs it for her studio." Mom continued with an overly bright smile, as if she were offering me an opportunity instead of an eviction. "The lighting's perfect in there, and she needs more space for her equipment." Before I could even respond, Dad's fist slammed against the table, rattling the water glasses. "Either give it up or get out," he barked. "It's time you found your own place anyway." The words hit like cold water. Madison smirked, twisting a strand of blonde hair around her finger. "It's not like you need the space just to shuffle papers," she said with a lazy shrug. The table went silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting for tears, an argument, a scene. Instead, I sliced a piece of pot roast, chewed slowly, and swallowed without a word. My face was unreadable, but inside my mind, another scene unfolded entirely. That small 1x2 bedroom upstairs wasn't just a room. It was my refuge, my command center, the quiet space where I'd built an entire life they knew nothing about. The shelves I'd installed myself were lined with finance books, and on the modest desk sat a computer, its screen often displaying an investment portfolio worth millions. While they cheered for Madison's talent shows and school plays, I'd been working, saving every penny from weekend jobs in high school, taking online finance courses during college, building a consulting business one client, one late night at a time. Beneath the table, I glanced at my phone, where I'd been scrolling through apartment listings all week. I'd been planning this escape for years, investing quietly while they assumed I was drifting between temp jobs. My mind drifted back to when I was 14, the day I learned exactly where I stood in this family. I could still feel the rough edges of a shoebox in my hands as I counted out $780 in crumpled bills, savings from diner shifts and tips, enough to buy the laptop I needed for my finance studies. That afternoon, Mom had appeared in my doorway wearing the same gentle smile she wore now. "Sweetheart, Madison needs some new video gear for her school project," she'd said sweetly. It could really help her get into that arts program. Dad hadn't even asked before taking the box from my hands. "Your sister needs this for her future," he said firmly. I'd locked myself in the bathroom afterward, tears falling silently onto the cold tile as I promised myself that day I would never depend on them again. From that moment on, I understood my place, the invisible daughter, the background figure whose efforts were never worthy of applause. 13 years later, nothing had changed, except me. I set my napkin beside my plate and rose quietly from the table, the chair sliding back with barely a sound. "I understand," I said calmly. "I'll have an answer by next Sunday." Madison's smirk faltered. Mom and Dad exchanged uncertain glances. This wasn't the reaction they'd expected. They wanted tears pleading, the same old Alexandra who would eventually give in. At the far end of the table, my younger brother, only 18, watched me with something unexpected. Not pity, not amusement, but empathy. Perhaps he was starting to see things more clearly than they ever had. "Alexandra," Mom began, but I was already walking toward the stairs. "We can discuss the details later," I said evenly over my shoulder. "Madison, make a list of the changes you want for the room. I'll need to prepare accordingly." Behind me, their voices resumed, already talking about paint colors and lighting setup, erasing me from the picture, just as they always had. Upstairs, in the quiet of my room, I closed the door and pulled out my phone. I scrolled to a contact I'd added months ago but never called. Until now, Marjorie Klein, a professional voice, answered on the second ring. I took a deep breath, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. "Marjorie, this is Alexandra Pierce," I said, eyes drifting to the window where the for sale sign across the street glowed faintly under the streetlight. "I'm ready to make that move we discussed." The next morning, Dad's laptop sat unattended on the kitchen counter, his email still open like a map no one meant to leave out. The house was quiet except for the low hum of the dishwasher. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the trackpad. This wasn't my usual line to cross, but then again, neither was their ultimatum about my room. A folder labeled Family Finances blinked at me. I clicked. Rows of spreadsheets unfurled across the screen, columns of purchases, notes in Dad's neat handwriting, totals that made my stomach lurch. Credit cards stacked like a house of cards. At the bottom of one sheet, a number glared, $180,000, cameras, softboxes, editing software, a $3,000 charge from last month for a weekend intensive with a social media guru in Chicago, annotated as a business investment. Line after line, the same story, debt disguised as destiny, all in service of Madison's online persona. I kept digging. An email thread between my parents discussed a second mortgage our home, the one that raised us, tethered to Madison's dream with another lien. A new message notification popped up. Madison to her talent agent. I shouldn't open it. I did. Projected to hit 50K followers next month. She wrote. Dad had a stats dashboard bookmarked in the browser. I checked the real number, 19,723, less than half her projection. The front doorknob rattled. I snapped the laptop shut and moved toward the stairs, pulse pounding. Mom came in with grocery bags and a breezy smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Alexandra," she called, dropping keys into the ceramic dish. "Don't forget Sunday's deadline. Madison's been planning her studio for weeks. My financial paperwork," I began, "will box it up for you." She sang out, sugary, sweet. "Though some of it might accidentally get tossed while we're decluttering. You know how that happens." The casual threat slid over me like ice water. 7 days. That's all I had before they expected my surrender, and with it, a quiet erasure of the life I'd built. I grabbed my laptop and drove to Crimson Cup, my unofficial second office. The barista nodded in recognition. "Black coffee," I said. "No room." In my usual corner booth, I opened my dashboard. The numbers glowed steady and sure. $2, $7 million in company earnings this fiscal year, 3 full-time employees, clients in 4 countries. I took a long sip and felt something uncoil, a calm that had very little to do with caffeine. They never saw me. Maybe they never would. My phone buzzed. Marjorie Klein found 3 properties that match what we discussed. Can you view this afternoon? A plan crystallized in my mind, sharper than anger, cleaner than revenge. I typed, yes, 1 request, ideally visible from my parents' house. Her reply was instant. I have just the place, 3 p.m. Perfect. By mid-afternoon, Marjorie's sleek sedan pulled up in front of a two-story colonial directly across from my parents' home. The for sale sign I'd been eyeing for weeks leaned slightly in the autumn breeze. This is exactly what I want, I said as we walked the stone path. Marjorie's professional veneer cracked the slightest bit. Interesting, she murmured. Most clients focus on what they want to see, not what they want others to see. Before I could answer, a familiar voice called my name. Chloe Baxter crossed the street toward us, auburn hair catching the light, a folder hugged to her side. I brought those listings, she said, climbing the steps with an easy grin. But it looks like Marjorie's already found the headliner. Chloe had believed in me back when my business plan lived on napkins and late nights. Where others saw a pipe dream, she saw foundations. Inside, the house smelled faintly of lemon oil and fresh paint. Sunlight spilled across hardwood floors. Tins lined the office like they'd been waiting for ledgers and strategy binders. In the master bedroom, a broad window framed my parents' front yard like a painting. My bank manager was impressed. Marjorie said, stylus flicking across her tablet, Approval is solid. Sellers are motivated. We can fast track if you're serious. My phone buzzed, Illy. Whatever you're planning, you deserve better than this. I stared at the message, surprised by the warmth that rose in my chest. When had my little brother started noticing the fault lines in our house? I'll take it. I told Marjorie, tucking my phone away, how fast can we close? She lifted a brow. If we push. Wednesday. Do it. I said, I'll wire the down payment tonight. Later, at our dining table, my family deep in conversation about Madison's brand strategy, I signed the preliminary documents Marjorie had sent. My parents still believed I was chasing job postings between temp stints, unaware their invisible daughter was about to become their most visible neighbor. The transfer went out with a single click. Years of disciplined work distilled into numbers moving between banks. Bittersweet settled in my throat. I was buying a home and acknowledging a loss, or maybe the loss had happened long ago, and I was finally choosing to stop pretending otherwise. Pride rose in its place, quiet and steady. I had built this without their applause, without their belief. Maybe that made it more mine than anything else. As Madison bragged about a promising new sponsorship, a whisper of doubt flickered. Was this vengeance or a door opening? Perhaps both. Perhaps I didn't owe the past a tidy label. The next morning, thin light threaded through my curtains. The soft rustle by my bookshelf turned my blood cold. Mom stood there with a trash bag and an armload of my finance folders. What are you doing? I sat up, heart thudding. Just tidying, sweetheart, she said in that honeyed tone. These old papers were collecting dust. 3 steps and I was there, sliding the folders from her hands. Those are important. Oh, Alexandra, she laughed lightly. You and your paperwork. Madison needs the room pristine for her equipment. My phone buzz. Madison's Instagram. A Christmas photo of our family. Her caption, making room for my dream studio, so blessed to have supportive parents. #influencer life, #dreams coming true. 60. 3 likes already. I thought we said Sunday. I said, shelving the folders carefully. Plans changed. Mom replied, knotting the trash bag. Her equipment arrives Wednesday. You're adaptable, honey. It's what I love about you. Adaptable, their polite word for invisible. Downstairs, Dad nursed his coffee and scanned the sports section. His gaze flicked up, then away. Some people in this house don't understand sacrifice. He muttered, ungrateful kids. The irony burned worse than the drink. I said nothing, counting hours until I would never again tiptoe around anyone's temper. That evening, extended family crammed around our table for Mom's monthly dinner. After the green beans and golf stories, Mom tapped her spoon. "We have wonderful news," she announced, smile practiced and bright. Madison has a potential cosmetics sponsorship. They are sending professional equipment. A delight rippled around the table, and Alexandra, Mom added, is giving up her room so Madison can build her studio. Such a supportive sister. Every face swung toward me, waiting for the performance. Pleasantries, deference, a staged smile. I raised my water glass. Family supports family. I said serenely, right. My phone chimed later, Marjorie. Found the perfect house, 4 bedrooms, directly across, virtual tour tomorrow. Yes, I typed, hope unfurling like a banner. First thing, the tour sealed it. The office had bill, tins, a bay window overlooking my parents' front door. I could work in plain sight, and seen only by those who refused to look. What do you think? Marjorie asked over the video call. It's perfect, I whispered. How quickly can we close? With your file and my contacts. She said, smile sharpening into resolve, you could have keys in your hand Wednesday morning. Wednesday, I repeated, thinking of Madison's delivery, not coincidence, alignment. Tuesday afternoon, I signed in Marjorie's office under warm lamplight, legal pages spreading like wings across the polished table. My hand trembled slightly at the final signature, a cocktail of terror and triumph. In 20 years, Marjorie said gently, collecting the papers, I've rarely seen someone your age this prepared. The words loosened something tight in my chest. Back home, I was organizing client files when my door swung open without a knock. Madison strode in with a measuring tape. Can I help you? I asked, not looking up, just mapping my lighting setup. She said, stretching tape along a wall, the space is barely adequate, but I can make it work. I kept typing, unhurried. I see, my brand's on the verge of a 7-figure valuation. She went on, pacing out dimensions. I need this more than you do. It's not like you're doing anything important here. If she only knew. We'll see on Sunday, I said, saving my document. She laughed, sharp as glass. Mom and Dad already decided. You don't have a choice. I met her eyes and allowed a small, private smile. Everyone has choices. Some of us simply take longer to make them. Her confusion flashed, then vanished beneath an eye roll and a slammed door. That night, Chloe arrived with flattened boxes and a grin that said game on. Operation Independence, she whispered, snapping tape from a dispenser. I brought an essentials list. We packed the life I'd built, carefully, deliberately, leaving just enough behind to keep the illusion intact. 2 college friends joined with more boxes and quiet focus. Chloe's phone buzzed. Illy says your parents went for ice cream. She reported he'll stall them. Unexpected warmth surged again. My brother had chosen a side, his own. Just past midnight, Marjorie called. We're confirmed. 9 a.m., closing. Movers at your parents' by 10 while everyone's at work. Wednesday broke bright and clear. Marjorie placed the keys in my palm. Congratulations, homeowner. At exactly 10, the movers pulled up professional, efficient, discreet. I guided them through the hallway I'd paced since childhood. Desk, books, the clothes and file boxes that proved a life most people had never noticed. By noon, sunlight pooled across my new master bedroom. Through the window, my parents' house sat squarely in view, my former room a stage now empty of me. "Where do you want the desk, ma'am?" a mover asked, nodding toward my work table. "In the office," I said, facing the front window. Chloe arrived with takeout and wonder in her eyes. "It's gorgeous, Alex, and huge. We ate cross-legged amid boxes. Be honest," she said softly. "Is this revenge or release?" I watched the light shift across the floorboards, warm and ordinary and perfect. "It isn't about teaching them a lesson," I said. "It's about finally being seen, even if the only person who truly sees me is me." That evening, I arranged my most important documents in a leather folio: deed, financials, company overview, the facts anchored. I practiced my expression in the mirror, steady, unruffled. Sunday would require clarity, not catharsis. I laid out a navy blazer and a cream silk blouse, familiar, professional, unmistakably mine. Before leaving my parents' house for the last time, I placed my childhood teddy bear on the stripped bed, a quiet benediction for the girl who had learned to thrive in the corners. Saturday night, I stood at my window, watching the glow across the street. Madison's car arrived, friends tumbling out. Through the upstairs panes, I could see them tour the empty room, her hands sketching big plans in the air. My phone chimedly. "They think you're staying with Chloe." "What are you actually doing?" "Come for coffee tomorrow," I typed back. "You'll want to see this." I set my phone down and wandered through rooms that belonged to no one but me. On the entry table, I centered the deed folder with care. "Tomorrow," I whispered to the quiet house, "you'll finally see me." Sunday dawned with a crisp, golden stillness, the kind of morning that feels like a clean slate. I adjusted the lapel of my tailored gray blazer and crossed the quiet street, deed folder in hand. The October air bit gently at my cheeks, grounding me in the moment. Through the kitchen window, I saw them, my parents at the table, coffee cups in hand, Madison scrolling on her phone, illy half, listening. The same tableau I'd watched my entire life, only this time I wasn't part of it. I was arriving on my own terms. I knocked, twice, sharp and sure. Mom opened the door, smile practiced, but faltering the instant she registered my attire. "Alexandra, we weren't expecting you so early," she said, eyes flicking past me toward the street, as though searching for Chloe's car. I walked. I replied simply, stepping inside. The kitchen fell silent. Dad looked up from his paper, Madison glanced up from her screen, and Ellie offered a small, genuine nod. I poured myself coffee from the pot on the counter, the motion as familiar as breathing, though today it felt entirely different. This time it was choice, not habit. Madison leaned back, feigning casual interest. "I thought you'd be bringing your stuff today," she said lightly. "I've already picked out paint colors. Blush pink for the backdrop, maybe gold accents for the wall." I stirred my coffee. "That sounds nice." Encouraged by what she thought was compliance, she launched into a long list: camera placement, shelving units, lighting design. While Dad's patience thinned, the room felt like a stage, and everyone waited for their cues. I let them talk until the moment ripened. "When are you moving your things?" Dad cut in finally, folding his paper with that familiar snap of authority. I looked up, meeting his eyes. "I already did," I said evenly. "Wednesday was my first day." The silence that followed was thick enough to taste. Mom blinked. "Alexandra, staying with Chloe isn't a real solution, dear. You need to think rationally." Dad barked a short laugh. "You'll be back when rent catches up with you. The real world is expensive, especially when you don't have steady work." Madison reached across the table, the picture of condescension. "Don't be upset just because things are finally going well for me. We all have different paths. Yours just hasn't developed yet." Their confidence was unshakable, their version of me so small they couldn't imagine anything else. But for the first time, I noticed unease in Mom's eyes, something cracking behind the veneer, "Thank you for your concern," I said calmly, setting my cup down, "but I'm not renting." I placed the leather folder on the table. "I bought a house." The words hit like glass shattering. For a moment, no one breathed. What? Mom managed finally. I gestured toward the window, the one across the street. Her coffee cup slipped, brown liquid spreading across the white tablecloth. Dad's jaw worked soundlessly. Madison froze mid. Scroll, phone still in hand, Illy broke the silence. "You bought that house, across the street." His voice carried no judgment, only awe. I nodded. "I own a financial consulting firm. We manage investment portfolios. Last quarter, we cleared $2.7 million in revenue." The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Dad's face drained of color. You've been lying about your job." "No," I corrected softly. "You assumed I didn't have one. You never asked." The distinction landed squarely. Mom rallied first, her tone brittle. "It's probably just a starter home, dear. A modest mortgage." I slid my financial statement across the table. 60% down, fixed rate at 8%. Madison's phone slipped from her hand with a dull clatter. "You've been, what, hoarding money while we helped you," she sputtered, "while you dismissed me." I said simply. Dad's palm hit the table. "This attitude is unacceptable." I leaned back, composed. What's unacceptable is pretending support exists where there's only convenience. Mom rose abruptly, reaching for her phone. "I need to call Aunt Patricia. She'll be horrified. She already knows." I said, sipping calmly. "She's coming to my housewarming next weekend." In less than an hour, they scrambled to reassemble the family narrative. Mom made calls, her voice rising as relatives failed to echo her outrage. Madison posted a vague Instagram story about toxic family betrayal, which earned half her usual engagement. Through the window, I saw our elderly neighbor, Mr. Johnson, pause on his walk to admire the antique desk being carried into my front door. The neighborhood whisper network would handle the rest. The doorbell rang. Chloe stepped in carrying a leafy plant and a bottle of champagne. "A gift for the new homeowner," she said brightly, setting them on the counter. The air in the room tightened. "Thank you," I said, genuine warmth edging my voice for the first time that morning. Illy stood abruptly, glancing between our parents and me. "Can I see your new place, Alex?" It wasn't a question about real estate. It was a decision, a crossing of invisible lines, of course. I said, gathering my folder. "Anytime." As we reached the door, Dad cleared his throat. "We should discuss your visits. Sunday dinners are tradition." "I'm still family," I said, smiling faintly, "just living across the street instead of upstairs." Mom's answering smile didn't reach her eyes. "Of course, dear, we're just adjusting. Not sudden," I replied, opening the door, just finally visible. Outside, Marjorie's car slowed near the market corner, right on time. By afternoon, every neighbor would know my home's closing price and down payment amount. Visibility had a rhythm all its own. A delivery van pulled up in front of my new house, the driver carrying an enormous bouquet to the porch. Congratulatory flowers from my business partners. Perfect timing, perfectly placed. When I turned back toward the kitchen window, my family stood frozen. Madison's fingers flew across her screen, likely dealing with a storm of DM about fake. Follower exposes circulating online. Mom and Dad exchanged pale, silent looks, realization dawning too late. "Success is built in silence," I said softly to myself, while others are still performing. The door clicked shut behind me, neat and final, dividing who I was from who I'd become. 2 weeks later, the sound of my doorbell echoed through the quiet of my new home. I set my coffee down and glanced through the peephole. There she was, My mother, standing on the porch, her posture composed, her smile rehearsed, a gleaming pie dish cradled in her hands. I took a steadying breath before opening the door. "Alexandra, sweetheart," she began, her voice honeyed and soft, holding up the golden brown apple pie. Steam still curled from its lattice crust. "I made your favorite, thought we could talk." I stepped aside wordlessly. She entered, eyes darting around the entryway as though inspecting a stranger's success. Her gaze lingered on the polished staircase, the art-lined walls, the subtle luxury she'd once insisted I'd never achieve. "This is," she hesitated, adjusting her pearl necklace, "quite something you've done here." "It is," I said, setting 2 cups on the counter. "Coffee?" She nodded, though her attention remained fixed on the house itself. Its quiet elegance, its proof. When she finally spoke again, her voice wavered at the edges. "Your father and I always believed in you, you know." I almost laughed, but instead poured the coffee, of course. Silence stretched between us, filled with the sound of the spoon tapping her cup. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted. Less pride, more calculation. "Madison's been having a hard time," she said carefully. "Something about sponsors pulling back. A technical issue with her follower counts, I think." "I see," I murmured, sipping slowly. "Family supports family, Alexandra," she continued, reaching across the counter to touch my hand. "You know that." I didn't pull away, but neither did I return the gesture. "We do," I said quietly, "but real support isn't supposed to come at someone else's expense." Her fingers tightened for a fraction of a second before she released them, smiling as if nothing had shifted at all. "You always were so independent," she said, almost stubborn. "Guess it worked out," I replied. Later that afternoon, Dad made his appearance, timed perfectly, as if they'd planned a 2-part strategy. I was collecting my mail when he approached across the street, his expression strained into something halfway between pride and regret. "Your mother misses you," he said without preamble. "We all do. It's time we put this behind us. We're still family." I sorted through the envelopes, pretending to read one. "I'm open to that," I said. "As long as it's mutual." Relief flickered across his face, too soon. He thought mutual meant forgive and forget. But I'd spent years learning that forgetting only fed the cycle. That evening, my phone vibrated endlessly. Text after text from Madison. "You're destroying this family," Mom cried all afternoon. "Everyone thinks you're selfish after all they did for you." I placed the phone face down on my coffee table, its vibrations growing softer, less urgent, until they finally stopped. Peace settled where guilt used to live. The next morning, Mom called. "Your Aunt Patricia asked why you weren't at dinner last night," she said, her tone pointed. "People are starting to talk. It doesn't look good for the family." Dad followed with a voicemail later that day, his voice gruff, uneasy. "Your success. It seems a little sudden, Alexandra. Are you sure you're not involved in something questionable?" I deleted it mid-sentence. The final blow came the next day, a formal dinner invitation delivered to my mailbox, heavy cream cardstock, cursive lettering, and the same tone they'd always used to mask manipulation. "Dinner at the Pierce residence, 7 p.m. to reconcile differences. After all we've done for you." I stared at the postscript for a long time. Old guilt stirred, whispering familiar lies. Maybe I am being too harsh. Maybe I owe them some peace. By evening, doubt had almost convinced me, until Chloe arrived with her usual clarity and a bag of bagels. "Remember the laptop?" she asked, spreading cream cheese with deliberate force. "The one you bought at 14 with diner tips. The one your parents took for Madison's camera." I blinked, stung by the memory. That was 13 years ago. Chloe looked up, steady and sharp. "And that's exactly the problem. They've been cashing in on your silence for 13 years. Her words landed like truth usually does, painful but freeing. After she left, I pulled out the journals I'd kept since childhood. Page after page chronicled the same story, me working, them taking, me shrinking. Each entry a breadcrumb leading to the same conclusion. Their love had always been conditional. Mine didn't have to be. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house precisely at 7. The table gleamed with fine china, the air thick with unspoken rehearsals. Mom's smile was stretched too wide. "You came," she exclaimed, voice dripping relief. I took my seat, straight, backed calm, no longer the invisible daughter they'd shaped, but a woman who had learned to choose herself. Throughout the salad course, Madison tried to provoke me with little jabs disguised as jokes. "Not everyone can buy their way into feeling important," she muttered, stabbing her lettuce. "You're right," I said evenly. "Some of us have to earn it." Her fork clattered against her plate. When the main course arrived, Dad cleared his throat, preparing his family unity speech, but I spoke first. I needed to build a life that was mine. I said quietly, "You needed me to stay small so you could feel big. Those two things couldn't coexist." Mom froze mid-motion, her hand suspended halfway to her water glass. "Alexandra, we never. I'm open to a relationship." I interrupted, but only one built on mutual respect. No more taking under the guise of love. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the tick of the wall clock. Dad's jaw tightened. "And what does that mean exactly?" "It means boundaries," I said simply. "It means if you want to rebuild, we start with honesty." I explained calmly and clearly how I'd built my business, how I'd paid for college myself, taken online finance courses, worked weekends, built clients one by one. Their expressions shifted from disbelief to shame to something bordering on fear. "That spread, cheat hobby," I said quietly, quoting their old dismissal, "now employs 5 people. Madison's face hardened. Envy had replaced superiority, her foundation cracking in real time. Mom forced a smile. "Speaking of finances," she began, tone falsely sweet, "perhaps you could help us, just temporarily, until Madison finds her footing again." There it was the trap. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin folder, sliding it across the table. Inside were copies of the withdrawals they'd made in my name over the years. My college account drained for Madison's headshots, the stolen laptop fund, the second mortgage emails. Proof neat, undeniable, dated. Dad's mouth opened, but no words came. Madison launched into a tirade about fairness, about family loyalty, but her voice only exposed her entitlement more clearly than I ever could. I remained calm, detached from the chaos I'd once drowned in. When the noise subsided, I stood. "I'm still open to family," I said quietly, "but not to manipulation. You can apologize and rebuild, or stay where you are. The choice is yours." Their faces were a mix of confusion, pride, and pan, wrestling with a reality they'd spent years denying. "You gave me an ultimatum about my room," I said softly, gathering my coat. "I chose freedom." I walked out without looking back. The short distance across the street felt like crossing an ocean. From my porch, I could still see their windows glowing, familiar, distant, and no longer mine. Illy appeared at his upstairs window, eyes meeting mine across the dark. I lifted a hand in a small wave. He returned it, silent but steady, a quiet bridge between what was and what could still be. One by one, their lights went dark. My house remained lit, steady, warm, and alive. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible. I felt home. The morning sunlight poured through my kitchen window, spreading a golden warmth across the countertop. 6 months had passed since that unforgettable Sunday dinner, the day I stopped shrinking and finally stepped into my own life. Now everything felt different. This house, once my bold statement, had become my sanctuary, no longer a symbol of defiance, but of peace. I lifted my coffee mug and stepped onto the porch, breathing in the crisp autumn air that smelled faintly of maple and freedom. Inside, my home buzzed softly with life. The walls that were once bare now held framed certificates from the Columbus Business Association, one naming me Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year. My firm had grown from 3 employees to 5, with clients across continents. Each monthly meeting in my converted dining room reminded me that I'd built something real, something lasting. Across the street, my parents' curtains stayed drawn. The for sale sign had appeared weeks ago, shortly after Madison's last sponsored post, an announcement of her career transition into marketing. I hadn't felt triumph, only a quiet acceptance. The fantasy had burned itself out. "Morning, Alexandra." Mrs. Henderson from next door waved cheerfully, her hands smudged with garden soil. "Those mums on your steps are gorgeous. Thank you." I smiled back, still not used to being seen, in a neighborhood where I'd once been nothing more than a shadow behind someone else's story. I glanced at my watch. 3 hours until the housewarming party. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same dining table where I once sat silent beneath my father's authority now stood in my living room, repurposed for celebration. I'd bought it at their estate sale, paid twice its worth, and carried it home myself, not as revenge, as reclamation. The doorbell rang. Illy stood there holding a potted plant, shoulders squared, his grin bright and genuine. "You're early," I said, opening the door. "Thought you might need help setting up." He said, setting the pot down, "Place looks amazing, Alex. Thanks for coming." I smiled, squeezing his arm. 19 suited him. College had given him confidence, direction, and perspective. Our bond, once fragile, had grown into something unbreakable, forged in truth instead of silence. As he helped me arrange chairs, he asked quietly, "Remember when Dad used to ask where you saw yourself in 5 years?" I chuckled softly. "Oh, I remember." "Well," he said, looking around, "where do you see yourself now?" His tone wasn't mocking, it was sincere. For the first time, the question wasn't a test. It was a reflection. "Building something that matters," I said. "Not just business success, but a life where I don't have to prove my worth to anyone." Later, as I unpacked the catering trays, I found an old leather journal in one of the remaining boxes. Inside, a page from my teenage years caught my eye. The handwriting was cramped, but the words were clear. The room they took became the foundation for the life I built. I smiled. That girl, hurt, determined, unseen, had no idea she'd one day stand here free. By noon, the house filled with laughter and conversation. Chloe was first through the door, hugging me tight. "To building your own house," literally and figuratively. She toasted, raising her glass. Marjorie came next, no longer the distant realtor, but a friend who believed in second chances. My business partners followed, along with clients who had become allies. The air vibrated with possibility. Talk of new projects, mentorships, expansions. It was everything my family dinners had never been: hopeful, equal, kind. In the middle of it all, I slipped into my office for a quiet moment. Papers lay ready on my desk. The launch forms for the Alexandra Pierce Scholarship Fund, dedicated to helping students from difficult family situations pursue business or finance. I had met the first recipient yesterday, a bright girl who reminded me of myself at 16, full of potential but doubting her own worth. I'd told her, "Your value isn't measured by who ignores you, but by how fiercely you keep going anyway." The look in her eyes had been worth more than every award on my wall. Evening arrived wrapped in a calm glow. I stood on the porch, watering the plants Illy had brought, when a familiar sound drifted across the street. The creak of a U-Haul ramp. Madison was moving out. Her car was smaller than before. The laughter of her entourage replaced by silence. Mom and Dad carried boxes to their sedan, their faces drawn and pale beneath the setting sun. The house that once echoed with noise now looked hollow. I raised a hand in a small wave, not forgiveness, not gloating, just acknowledgement, the kind that says, I've made peace with the past, even if you haven't. They looked up briefly, nodded, then went back to packing. For a long moment, I simply watched, not with anger, but gratitude, for what losing them had taught me about finding myself. I turned, stepping back into my home, my own home. The walls glowed in the amber light, the air thick with the scent of candles and comfort. The desk where I'd once built an invisible empire now overlooked a future I didn't need permission to claim. That night, I stood at my bedroom door, looking around the space that was wholly mine. Every detail carried a story. The framed deed, the journals, the soft hum of the computer that connected me to clients around the world. No one could take any of it from me. Not anymore. Outside, the moon rose above the rooftops, pale and certain. I slipped into bed, cool sheets wrapping me in quiet pride. For the first time in my life, I slept without wondering if I was enough, because I already knew I was, and maybe that's the real story here, not about rebellion or revenge, but recognition. Because sometimes the greatest act of love isn't staying loyal to those who silence you. It's choosing to believe in yourself when no one else does.